Hello, this is Todd Booth, and I'll be giving a lecture on the course book. Okay, we're into Chapter 7, Wireless Network Security, and the chapter begins with a general overview of wireless security issues, and then we focus on the relatively new area of mobile device security, for example, mobile phones and surf pads. And we examine the threats and also the countermeasures for mobile devices used in the enterprise. Then we're going to look at the standard IEEE 802.11i, and that's a standard for wireless LAN security. It's part of the overall 802.11 standard, also referred to as Wi-Fi. We'll begin the discussion with an overview of that standard, and then we'll look at some of the details of the 802.11i security standard. So I'll just let you read this, but this chapter looks at two important wireless network security schemes. First, we look at the IEEE 802.11i standard for wireless LAN security, and the remainder of the chapter is devoted to security standards for web access from mobile wireless devices, such as cell phones. Wireless security. So wireless networks and the wireless devices that use them introduced a host of security problems over and above those found in wired networks. Some of the key factors contributing to the higher security risk of wireless network compared to wired networks includes the following. Channel. Wireless networking typically involves broadcast communications, which is far more susceptible to eavesdropping and jamming than wired networks. Wireless networks are also more vulnerable to active attacks that exploit vulnerabilities in communications protocols. Mobility. Wireless devices are, in principle and usually in practice, far more portable and mobile than wired devices. This mobility results in a number of risks, which will be described. Resources. Some wireless devices, such as smartphones and tablets, have sophisticated operating systems but limited memory and processing resources. And we need that processing power to counter threats, including denial of service and malware. Accessibility. Some wireless devices, such as sensors and robots, may be left unattended in remote and/or hostile locations, and this greatly increases their vulnerability to physical attacks. So here we have a figure of wireless networking components, and in simple terms, the wireless environment consists of three components that provide a point of attack. The wireless client can be a cell phone, a Wi-Fi enabled laptop or tablet, a wireless sensor, a Bluetooth device, and so on. The wireless access point provides a connection to the network or service. Examples of access points are cell towers, Wi-Fi hotspots, and wireless access points to wired, local, or wide area networks. The transmission medium, which carries the radio waves for data transfer, is also a source of vulnerabilities. Wireless network threats. We have the following security threats to wireless networks. Accidental association. Company wireless LANs or wireless access points to wired LANs in close proximity, for example in the same neighborhood or building, may create overlapping transmission ranges. A user intending to connect to one LAN may unintentionally lock onto a wireless access point from a neighboring network. Although the security breach is accidental, it nevertheless exposes resources of one LAN to the accidental user. Malicious association. In this association, a wireless device is configured to appear to be a legitimate access point, enabling the operator to steal passwords from legitimate users and then penetrate a wired network through a legitimate wireless access point. So for example, the hacker knows that at your company you're going to be surfing to a Wi-Fi with an SSID of, say, accounting department. So what they do is they set up their own wireless with the same SSID, and people log onto their wireless access point by accident, and then they can steal the passwords, and then they shut down the rogue access point, and then they connect with your credentials to the real one. Another problem is ad hoc networks. These are peer-to-peer networks between wireless computers with no access point between them. That means, for example, on Windows, you can set up your Windows PC to act like a wireless access point, and then you can surf to it with mobile phones, surf pads, other PCs, etc. Such networks can pose a security threat due to a lack of central point of control. Non-traditional networks. Non-traditional networks and links such as personal network, Bluetooth devices, barcode readers, handheld PDAs pose a security risk in terms of both eavesdropping and spoofing. Identity theft, MAC spoofing. This occurs when an attacker is able to eavesdrop on network traffic and identify the MAC address of a computer with network privileges, and then they change their own MAC address on their equipment to make it appear that they are the victim's machine or Ethernet machine via changing their network MAC address. There are man-in-the-middle attacks. This type of attack is described in Chapter 3 in the context of the Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol. In a broader sense, this attack involves persuading a user and an access point to believe they are talking to each other, when in fact the communication is going through an intermediate attacking device. Wireless networks are particularly vulnerable to such types of attacks. Denial of service, DOS. This type of attack is discussed in detail in Chapter 10. In the context of a wireless network, a DOS attack occurs when an attacker continually bombards a wireless access point or some other accessible wireless port with various protocol messages designed to consume resources. The wireless environment lends itself to this type of attack because it is so easy for the attacker to direct multiple wireless messages at the target. Network injection. A network injection attack targets wireless access points that are exposed to non-filtered network traffic, such as routing protocol messages or network management messages. An example of such an attack is one in which bogus reconfiguration commands are used to affect routers and switches to degrade network performance. Securing wireless transmissions. The principal threats to wireless transmission are eavesdropping, altering or inserting messages, and disruption. To deal with eavesdropping, two types of countermeasures are appropriate. Signal hiding techniques. Organizations can take a number of measures to make it more difficult for an attacker to locate their wireless access points, including turning off Service Set Identifier SSID broadcasting by wireless access points. Now, SSID is, for example, at home. You can configure the SSID to be home network, and when you bring up your PC and you scan your wireless, you'll see something. You'll see a list of names, and you'll see your own SSID there that you just created. So also, cryptic names can be assigned to SSIDs, reducing signal strength to the lowest level that is still possible is another alternative. So these are all ways you can try to hide your signal. You just disable the SSID, you change it to something cryptic, you reduce your signal strength so the employees in your office can have the signal strength to log into the Wi-Fi network. However, if you're in the parking lot, you want to make sure that the signal does not go out there, because then anyone passing by can see your signal on your wireless. You could also locate wireless access points in the interior of buildings away from windows and exterior walls. Greater security can be achieved by the use of directional antennas and of signal shielding techniques. Also, you can use encryption. So encryption of all wireless transmission is effective against eavesdropping to the extent that the encryption keys are secured and your security does not get cracked. The use of encryption and authentication protocols is the standard method of countering attempts to alter or insert transmissions. So the methods discussed in Chapter 10 for dealing with DOS apply to, and DOS meaning denial of service, DOS, apply to wireless transmissions. Organizations can also reduce the risk of unintentional DOS attacks. Site surveys can detect the existence of other devices using the same frequency range to help determine where to locate wireless access points. Signal strengths can be adjusted and shielded as an attempt to isolate a wireless environment from competing nearby transmissions. Securing wireless access points. The main threat involved in wireless access points is unauthorized access to the network. The principal approach for preventing such access is IEEE 802.1x standard for port-based network access control. The standard provides an authentication mechanism for devices wishing to attach to a LAN or a wireless network. The use of 802.1x can prevent rogue access points and other unauthorized devices from being insecure backdoors. Securing wireless networks. So here are some recommended techniques for wireless network security. Use encryption. Wireless routers are typically equipped with built-in encryption mechanisms for router-to-router traffic. Use antivirus and anti-spyware solutions and a firewall. These facilities should be enabled on all wireless network endpoints. Turn off identifier broadcasting. Wireless routers are typically configured to broadcast an identifying signal so that any device within the range can learn of the router's existence. If a network is configured so that authorized devices know the identity of the routers, this capability can be disabled so as to thwart attackers. Change the identifier on your router from the default. Again, this measure thwarts attackers who will attempt to gain access to a wireless network using default router identifiers. Change your router's preset password for administration. This is another prudent step. Otherwise, if they see what router you have and they know the default password, they can just look it up in the manual. They can use that password to get into your router. So it's really important to change that password. Allow only specific computers to access your wireless network. A router can be configured to only communicate with approved Layer 2 MAC addresses. Of course, MAC addresses can be spoofed, so this is just one element of a security strategy. Mobile device security. Prior to the widespread use of smartphones, the dominant paradigm for computer and network security in organizations was as follows. Corporate IT was tightly controlled. User devices were typically limited to Windows PCs. Business applications were controlled by IT and either run locally on endpoints or on physical servers in data centers. Network security was based upon clearly identified parameters that separated trusted internal networks from the untrusted internet. That was the big thing. We've got the internet, danger. We've got the internal network, safe. And that's basically how it was. But it's sure changing fast with smartphones and smart tablets. So today there's been massive changes in each of these assumptions I just mentioned. An organization's networks must accommodate the following. A growing use of new devices. Organizations are experiencing significant growth in employee use of mobile devices. In many cases, employees are allowed to use a combination of endpoint devices as part of their day-to-day activities. For example, surfing the company internet, getting your electronic mail. We also have cloud-based applications. Applications no longer run solely on physical servers in corporate data centers. Quite the opposite. Applications can run anywhere on traditional physical servers, on mobile virtual servers, or in the cloud. Additionally, end users can now take advantage of a wide range of cloud-based applications and IT services for personal and professional use. Facebook, for example, can be used for an employee's personal profiles or as a component of a corporate marketing campaign. Employees depend upon Skype to speak with friends abroad or for legitimate business video conferencing. Dropbox and Box can be used to distribute documents between corporate and personal devices for mobility and user productivity. Given new device proliferation, application mobility, and cloud-based consumer and corporate services, the notion of a static network perimeter is all but gone. Now there are a multitude of network perimeters around devices, applications, users, and data. These perimeters have also become quite dynamic as they must adapt to various environmental conditions such as user's role, device type, server virtualization, mobility, network location, and time of day. External business requirements. The enterprise must also provide guests, third-party contractors, and business partners network access during various times of the day from a multitude of locations and from a multitude of devices. The central element in all of these changes is the mobile computing device. Mobile devices have become an essential element for organizations as part of the overall network infrastructure. Mobile devices such as smartphones, tablets, and memory sticks provide increased convenience for individuals as well as potential security issues. Because of their widespread use and unique characteristics, security for mobile devices is a pressing and complex issue. In essence, an organization needs to implement a security policy through a combination of security features built into the mobile devices and additional security controls provided by network components that regulate the use of the mobile devices. Security threats. Mobile devices need additional specialized protection measures beyond those implemented for other client devices, such as desktop and laptop devices that are used only within the organization's facility and on the organization's networks. There are some guidelines for managing secure mobile devices in the enterprise, and they list 7 major security concerns for mobile devices. Let's examine these each in turn. Lack of physical security controls. Mobile devices are typically under the complete control of the user and are used and kept in a variety of locations outside the organization's control, including off-premises. Even if a device is required to remain on-premise, the user may move the device within the organization between secure and non-secure locations. Thus, theft and tampering are realistic threats. The security policy for mobile devices must be based on the assumption that any mobile device may be stolen or at least accessed by a malicious party. The threat is twofold. A malicious party may attempt to recover sensitive data from the device itself, or may use the device to gain access to the organization's resources. Use of untrusted mobile devices. In addition to company-issued and company-controlled mobile devices, virtually all employees will have personal smartphones and/or tablets. The organization must assume that these devices are not trustworthy. That is, the devices may not employ encryption, and either the user or a third party may have installed a bypass to the built-in restrictions on security, operating system use, and so on. Use of untrusted networks. If a mobile device is used on premises, it can connect to an organization's resources over the organization's own in-house wireless networks. However, for off-premises use, the user will typically access organizational resource via Wi-Fi or cellular access to the internet, and from the internet to the organization. Thus, traffic that includes an off-premises segment is potentially susceptible to eavesdropping or man-in-the-middle type attacks. Thus, the security policy must be based on the assumption that the networks between the mobile device and the organization are not trustworthy. Use of applications created by unknown parties. By design, it is easy to find and install third-party applications on mobile devices. This poses the obvious risk of installing malicious software. An organization has several options for dealing with this threat as described in the following. Interaction with other systems. A common feature found on smartphones and tablets is the ability to automatically synchronize data, apps, contacts, photos, and so on with other computing devices and with cloud-based storage. Unless an organization has control of all of the devices involved in synchronization, there is considerable risk of the organization's data being stored in an unsecured location, plus the risk of the introduction of malware. Use of untrusted content. Mobile devices may access and use content that other computing devices do not encounter. An example is the quick response code, which is a two-dimensional barcode. QR codes are designed to be captured by a mobile device camera and used by the mobile device. The QR code translates to a URL so that a malicious QR code could direct the mobile device to malicious websites. Use of location services. The GPS capability on mobile devices can be used to maintain a knowledge of the physical location of the device. While this feature might be useful for an organization as part of a presence service, it creates security risks. An attacker can use the location information to determine where the device and user are located, which may be of use to the attacker. For example, before they break into someone's room, if they know via GPS where the person is, they might know that they're not near their office. And if they break in, they know the person owning the phone and whose office it is won't be around to notice. Oh, here we have a figure on mobile device security elements. With the threats listed in the preceding discussion in mind, we outline the principal elements of a mobile device security strategy. They fall into three categories: device security, client-server traffic security, and barrier security. Device security. A number of organizations will supply mobile devices for employee use and pre-configure those devices to conform to the enterprise security policy. However, many organizations will find it convenient or even necessary to adopt a bring your own device policy that allows the personal mobile devices of employees to have access to corporate resources. IT managers should be able to inspect each device before allowing network access. IT will want to establish configuration guidelines for operating systems and applications. For example, rooted or jailbroken devices are not permitted on the network, and mobile devices cannot store corporate contacts on local storage. Whether a device is owned by the organization or BYOD, the organization should configure the device with security controls, including the following. Enable auto lock, which causes the device to lock if it has not been used for a given amount of time, and that will require the user to re-enter a 4-digit PIN or password to activate the device. Enable password or PIN protection. The PIN or password is needed to unlock the device. In addition, it can be configured so that email and other data on the device are encrypted using the PIN or password and can only be retrieved with the PIN or password. Avoid using autocomplete features that remember usernames or passwords. Enable remote wipe. And what that is for example, on my phone, I surfed Komodo.com from my Android and I installed the Komodo software security. And then from wherever I am, I can remotely wipe out all the data on my phone. So if it's stolen, I just enable remote wipe. Also, there are a lot of other features these security programs have. For example, GPS location. If I forget my phone somewhere, via the internet, I can see where my phone is based on its GPS location. You should ensure that the SSL or TLS protection is enabled if it's available. Make sure that software, including the operating system and applications, are up to date. Install antivirus software as it becomes available. Either sensitive data should be prohibited from storage on the mobile device, or it should be encrypted. IT staff should also have the ability to remotely access devices, wipe the device of all data, and then disable the device in the event of loss or threat. The organization may prohibit all installation of third-party applications, or may implement whitelisting to prohibit installation of all unapproved applications, or implement a secure sandbox that isolates the organization's data and applications from all other data and applications on the mobile device. Any application that is on an approved list should be accompanied by a digital signature and a public key certificate from an approved authority. The organization can implement and enforce restrictions on what devices can synchronize and on the use of cloud-based storage. To deal with the threat of untrusted content, security responses can include training of personnel on the risks inherent in untrusted content and disabling camera use on corporate mobile devices. To counter the threat of malicious use of location services, the security policy can dictate that such service is disabled on all mobile devices. Traffic security. Traffic security is based on the usual mechanisms for encryption and authentication. All traffic should be encrypted and travel by secure means such as SSL or IPv6. Virtual private networks can be configured so that all traffic between the mobile device and the organization's network is via a VPN. A strong authentication protocol should be used to limit the access from the device to the resources of the organization. Often a mobile device has a single device-specific authenticator because it is assumed that the device has only one user. A preferable strategy is to have a two-layer authentication mechanism, which involves authenticating the device and then authenticating the user of the device. Barrier security. The organization should have security mechanisms to protect the network from unauthorized access. The security strategy can also include firewall policies specific to mobile device traffic. Firewall policies can limit the scope of data and applications access for all mobile devices. Similarly, intrusion detection and intrusion prevention systems can be configured to have higher rules for mobile device traffic. IEEE 802.11 Wireless LAN Overview. IEEE 802 is a committee that has developed standards for a wide range of local area networks. In 1990, the IEEE 802 committee formed a new working group, IEEE 802.11, with a charter to develop protocol and transmission specifications for wireless LANs. Since that time, the demand for WLANs at different frequencies and data rates has exploded. Keeping pace with this demand, the IEEE 802.11 working group has issued an ever-expanding list of standards. So here's a table that discusses the IEEE 802.11 terminology, and I'll let you read through that. Go ahead and pause. Wi-Fi Alliance. The first 802.11 standard to gain broad industry acceptance was 802.11b. Although 802.11b products are all based on the same standard, there is always a concern whether products from different vendors will successfully interoperate. To meet this concern, the Wireless Ethernet Compatibility Alliance, WECA, an industry consortium, was formed in 1999. This organization subsequently renamed the Wi-Fi Alliance, created a test suite to certify interoperability for 802.11b products. The term used for certified 802.11b products is Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi certification has been extended to 802.11g products. The Wi-Fi Alliance has also developed a certification process for 802.11a products called Wi-Fi 5. The Wi-Fi Alliance is concerned with a range of market areas for WLANs, including enterprise, home, and hotspots. More recently, the Wi-Fi Alliance has developed certification procedures for 802.11 security standards referred to as Wi-Fi Protected Access, WPA. The most recent version of WPA, known as WPA2, incorporates all of the features of the IEEE 802.11i WLAN security specification. Here's a figure, the IEEE 802.11 protocol stack. Before proceeding, we need to briefly preview the 802.11 protocol architecture. The standards are defined within the structure of a layered set of protocols. This structure, used for all IEEE 802 standards, is illustrated in this figure. We have the physical layer. That's the lowest layer of the IEEE 802 reference model. It's the physical layer, which includes such functions as encoding and decoding of signals and bit transmission. In addition, the physical layer indicates a specification of the transmission medium. In the case of 802.11, the physical layer also defines frequency bands and antenna characteristics. Media access control. All LANs consist of collections of devices that share the network's transmission capacity. Some means of controlling access to the transmission medium is needed to provide an orderly and efficient use of that capacity. This is the function of a media access control MAC layer. The MAC layer receives data from a higher layer protocol, typically the logical link control LLC layer, in the form of a block of data known as the MAC Service Data Unit, MSDU. In general, the MAC layer performs the following functions. On transmission, assemble data into a frame known as a MAC Protocol Data Unit, MPDU, with address and error detection bits. On reception, disassemble the frame and perform address recognition and error detection. Govern access to the LAN transmission medium. Logical link control. In most data link control protocols, the data link protocol entity is responsible not only for detecting errors using the CRC, but for recovering from those errors by retransmitting damaged frames. In the LAN protocol architecture, these two functions are split between the MAC and LLC layers. The MAC layer is responsible for detecting errors and discarding any frames that contain errors. The LLC layer optionally keeps track of which frames have been successfully received and retransmits unsuccessful frames. And here we have a figure, general IEEE 802 MPDU format. The exact format of the MPDU differs somewhat for the various MAC protocols in use. In general, all the MPDUs have a format similar to that of this figure. The fields of this frame are as follows. MAC control. This field contains any protocol control information needed for the functioning of the MAC protocol. For example, a priority level could be indicated here. Destination MAC address. The destination physical address on the LAN for this MPDU. Source MAC address. The source physical address on the LAN for this MPDU. MAC Service Data Unit. The data from the next higher layer. CRC. This is also known as the frame check sequence field. This is an error detection code such that is which used by other data link control protocols. The CRC is calculated based on the bits in the entire MPDU. The sender calculates the CRC and adds it to the frame. The receiver performs the same calculation on the incoming MPDU and compares that calculation with the CRC field that they received. If the two values don't match, then one or more bits have been altered in transit. The fields preceding the MSDU field are referred to as the MAC header, And the field following the MSDU field is referred to as the MAC trailer. The header and trailer contain control information that accompany the data field and that are used by the MAC protocol. Here we have a figure, IEEE 802.11 Extended Service Set. This figure illustrates the model developed by the 802.11 Working Group. The smallest building block of a wireless LAN is a Basic Service Set, BSS, which consists of wireless stations executing the same MAC protocol and competing for access to the same shared wireless medium. A BSS may be isolated, or it may connect to a backbone distribution system, DS, through an access point, AP. The AP functions as a bridge and a relay point. In a BSS, client stations do not communicate directly with one another. Rather, if one station in the BSS wants to communicate with another station in the same BSS, the MAC frame is first sent from the originating station to the AP, and then from the AP to the destination station. Similarly, a MAC frame from a station in the BSS to a remote station is sent from the local station to the AP and then relayed by the AP over the DS on its way to the destination station. The BSS generally corresponds to what is referred to as a cell in the literature. The DS can be a switch, a wired network, or a wireless network. When all the stations in the BSS are mobile stations that communicate directly with one another, not using an AP, the BSS is called an independent BSS, IBSS. An IBSS is typically an ad hoc network. In an IBSS, the stations all communicate directly and no AP is involved. A simple configuration is shown in this figure, in which each station belongs to a single BSS. That is, each station is within wireless range only of other stations within the same BSS. It is also possible for two BSSs to overlap geographically, so that a single station could participate in more than one BSS. Furthermore, the association between a station and a BSS is dynamic. Stations may turn off, come within range, go out of range, etc. An extended service set, ESS, consists of two or more basic service sets interconnected by a distribution system. The extended service set appears as a single logical LAN to the logical link control layer. And here we have a table, IEEE 802.11 services. IEEE 802.11 defines 9 services that need to be provided by the wireless LAN to achieve functionality equivalent to that which is inherent to wired LANs. And this table lists those services and indicates 2 ways of categorizing them. 1. The service provider can be either the station or the DS. Station services are implemented in every 802.11 station, including AP stations. Distribution services are provided between BSSs. These services may be implemented in an AP or in another special purpose device attached to the distribution system. 3 of the services are used to control IEEE 802.11 LAN access and confidentiality. 6 of the services are used to support deliveries of MSDUs between stations. If the MSDU is too large to be transmitted in a single MPDU, it may be fragmented and transmitted in a series of MPDUs. Following the IEEE 802.11 document, we need to discuss the services in an order designed to clarify the operation of an IEEE 802.11 ESS network. MSDU delivery, which is the basic service, already has been mentioned. Services related to security are introduced later in section 7.4. distribution of messages within a DS. The two services involved with the distribution of messages within a DS are distribution and integration. Distribution is the primary service used by stations to exchange MPDUs when the MPDUs must traverse the DS to get from a station in one BSS to a station in another BSS. For example, suppose a frame is to be sent from station 2 to station 7. In the figure, the frame is sent from station 2 to the AP1, which is the AP for this BSS. The AP gives the frame to the DS, which has the job of directing the frame to the AP associated with station 7 in the target BSS. Access point 2 receives the frame and forwards it to station 7. How the message is transported through the DS is beyond the scope of the IEEE 802.11 standard. If the two stations that are communicating are within the same BSS, then the distribution service logically goes through a single AP of that BSS. The integration service enables the transfer of data between a station on an IEEE 802.11 LAN and a station on an integrated IEEE 802.x LAN. The term integrated refers to a wired LAN that is physically connected to the DS and whose stations may be logically connected to an IEEE 802.11 LAN via the integration service. The integration service takes care of any address translation and media conversion logic required for the exchange of data. Association-related services. The primary purpose of the MAC layer is to transfer MSDUs between MAC entities. This purpose is fulfilled by the distribution service. For that service to function, it requires information about stations within the ESS that is provided by the association-related services. Before the distribution service can deliver data or to accept data from a station, that station must be associated. Before looking at the concept of association, we need to describe the concept of mobility. The standard defines 3 transition types based on mobility. No transition. A station of this type is either stationary or moves only within the direct communication range of the communication stations of a single BSS. BSS transition. This is defined as a station movement from one BSS to another BSS within the same ESS. In this case, delivery of data to the station requires that the addressing capability be able to recognize the new location of the station. ESS transition. This is defined as a station movement from a single BSS in one ESS to a BS within another ESS. This case is supported only in the sense that the station can move. Maintenance of upper layer connections supported by 802.11 cannot be guaranteed. In fact, disruption of service is likely to occur. Association-related services. To deliver a message within a DS, the distribution service needs to know where the destination station is located. Specifically, the DS needs to know the identity of the AP to which the message should be delivered in order for the message to reach the destination station. To meet this requirement, a station must maintain an association with the AP within its current BSS. 3 services relate to this requirement. Association establishes an initial association between a station and an AP. Before a station can transmit or receive frames on a wireless LAN, its identity and address must be known. For this purpose, a station must establish an association with an AP with a particular BSS. The AP can then communicate this information to other APs within the ESS to facilitate routing and delivery of addressed frames. Reassociation enables an established association to be transferred from one AP to another, allowing a mobile station to move from one BSS to another. Disassociation, a notification from either a station or an AP that an existing association is terminated. A station should give this notification before leaving an ESS or shutting down. However, the Mac management facility protects itself against stations that disappear without notification. IEEE 802.11i Wireless LAN Security. There are two characteristics of a wired LAN that are not inherent in a wireless LAN. One, in order to transmit over a wired LAN, a station must be physically connected to the LAN. On the other hand, with a wireless LAN, any station within radio range of the other devices on the LAN can transmit. In a sense, there is a form of authentication with a wired LAN in that it requires some positive and presumably observable action to connect a station to a wired LAN. 2. Similarly, in order to receive a transmission from a station that is part of a wired LAN, the receiving station also must be attached to the wired LAN. On the other hand, with a wireless LAN, any station within radio range can receive. Thus, a wired LAN provides a degree of privacy, limiting reception of data to stations that are connected to the LAN. These differences between wired and wireless LANs suggest the increased need for robust security services and mechanisms for wireless LANs. The original 802.11 specification included a set of security features for privacy and authentication that were very weak. For privacy, 802.11 defined the Wired Equivalent Privacy Algorithm, WEP. The privacy portion of the 802.11 standard contained major weaknesses. Subsequent to the development of the WEP, the 802.11i task group has developed a set of capabilities to address the WLAN security issues. In order to accelerate the introduction of strong security into WLANs, the Wi-Fi Alliance has created the Wi-Fi Protected Access, WPA, as a Wi-Fi standard. WPA is a set of security mechanisms that eliminates most of the 802.11 security issues and was based on the current state of the IEEE 802.11i standard. The final form of the 802.11i standard is referred to as Robust Security Network, RSN. The Wi-Fi Alliance certifies vendors in compliance with the full 802.11i specification under the WPA2 program. The RSN specification is quite complex and occupies about 145 pages of the 2012 IEEE 802.11 standard. In this section, we'll provide just an overview. The 802.11i RSN security specification defines the following services. Authentication. A protocol is used to define an exchange between a user and an AS that provides mutual authentication and generates temporary keys to be used between the client and the AP over the wireless link. Access control. This function enforces the use of the authentication function, routes the messages properly, and facilitates key exchange. It can work with a variety of authentication protocols. Privacy with message integrity. Mac level data, for example an LLC PDU, are encrypted along with a message integrity code that ensures the data has not been altered. The figure A, 7.6a, indicates the security protocols used to support these services, while Figure 7.6b lists the cryptographic algorithms used for these services. Here we have a figure on the IEEE 802.11i phases of operation. The operation of the 802.11i RSN can be broken down into 5 distinct phases of operation. The exact nature of the phases will depend on the configuration and the endpoints of the communication. Possibilities include 1. Two wireless stations in the same BSS communicating via the access point for that BSS. 2. Two wireless stations in the same ad hoc IBSS communicating directly with each other. 3. Two wireless stations in different BSSs communicating via their respective APs across a distribution system. 4. A wireless station communicating with an end station on a wired network via its AP and the distribution system. IEEE 802.11i security is concerned only with the secure communication between the station and its AP. In case 1 of the preceding list, secure communication is assured if each station establishes secure communication with the AP. Case 2 is similar, with the AP functionality residing in the station itself. For case 3, security is not provided across the distribution system at the level of the IEEE 802.11, but only within each BSS. And let me give an example. You're at an internet cafe and some hacker or the mafia has set up the access point and the network. So when you're communicating within the wireless network, it may be encrypted over the wireless link, but as soon as it hits the access point and goes across a LAN cable, it's all decrypted, and then the hacker can watch all your traffic. So you have to keep that in mind, and you should probably run your own encryption at layer 3 or 4. That way when the hacker looks at the decrypted wireless traffic, even after decrypting the wireless traffic, the inner traffic is still encrypted. So if your traffic is going to hit the wired network, you need to have some kind of higher layer security. Similarly, in case 4, security is only provided between the station and its access point. With these considerations in mind, Figure 7.7 depicts the 5 phases of operation for an RSN and maps them to the network components involved. One new component is the authentication server, AS. The rectangles indicate the exchange of sequences of MPDUs. The 5 phases are defined as follows. Discovery. An AP uses messages called beacons and probe responses to advertise its 802.11i security policy. The station uses this information to identify an access point for a WLAN with it which it wishes to communicate with. The station associates with the AP, which it uses to select the cipher suite and authentication mechanism when the beacons and probe responses present a choice. Authentication. During this phase, the station and AS prove their identities to each other. The AP blocks non-authentication traffic between the station and AS until the authentication transaction is successful. The AP does not participate in the authentication transaction other than forwarding traffic between the station and the AS. Key generation and distribution. The AP and station perform several operations that cause cryptographic keys to be generated and placed on the AP and the station. Frames are exchanged between the AP and the station only. Protected data transfer. Frames are exchanged between the station and the end station through the AP, As denoted by the shading and the encryption module icon, secure data transfer occurs between the station and the AP only. Security is not provided end-to-end. Connection termination. The AP and station exchange frames. During this phase, the secure connection is torn down and the connection is restored to the original state. Here we have another figure, IEEE 802.11i, phases of operation, capability discovery, authentication, and association. We now look in more detail at the RSN phases of operation, beginning with the discovery phase, which is illustrated in the upper portion of the figure. The purpose of this phase is for a station and access point to recognize each other, agree on a set of security capabilities, and establish an association for future communication using those security capabilities. Security capabilities. During this phase, the station and AP decide on a specific technique in the following areas: confidentiality and MPDU integrity protocols for protecting unicast traffic, traffic only between this station and the access point. Authentication method, cryptographic keys management, confidentiality and integrity protocols for protecting multicast broadcast traffic are dictated by the AP, since all stations in a multicast group must use the same protocols and ciphers. The specification of a protocol, along with the chosen key length, if variable, is known as a cipher suite. The options for the confidentiality and integrity cipher suite are WEP, with either a 40-bit or 104-bit key, which allows backward compatibility with older IEEE 802.11 implementations. TKIP, CCMP, vendor-specific methods. The other negotiable suite is the Authentication and Key Management, AKM suite, which defines the means by which the AP and station perform mutual authentication, and 2, the means for deriving a root key from which other keys may be generated. The possible AKM suites are IEEE 802.1x, or pre-shared key. No explicit authentication takes place, and mutual authentication is simple if the STA and AP share a unique secret key. Vendor-specific methods exist. The discovery phase consists of 3 exchanges: network and security capability discovery. During this exchange, stations discover the existence of a network with which to communicate. The AP either periodically broadcasts its security capabilities, indicated by RSN, i.e., Robust Security Network Information Element, in a specific channel through the beacon frame, or responds to a station's probe request through a probe response frame. A wireless station may discover available access points and corresponding security capabilities by either passively monitoring the beacon frames or actively probing every channel. Open system authentication. The purpose of this frame sequence, which provides no security, is simply to maintain backward compatibility with the IEEE 802.11 state machine, as implemented in existing 802.11 hardware. In essence, the 2 devices, station and access point, simply exchange identifiers. Association. The purpose of this stage is to agree on a set of security capabilities to be used. The station sends an association request frame to the AP. In this frame, the station specifies one set of matching capabilities, one authentication and one key management suite, one pairwise cipher suite, and one group key cipher suite from among those advertised by the AP. If there is no match in capabilities between the AP and the station, the AP refuses the association request. The station blocks it too, in case it has associated with a rogue AP or someone's inserting frames illicitly on its channel. As shown in Figure 7.8, the IEEE 802.1x controlled ports are blocked, and no user traffic goes beyond the AP. The concept of blocked ports is explained subsequently. As was mentioned, the authentication phase enables mutual authentication between a station and an authentication server, AS, located in the DS. Authentication is designed to allow only authorized stations to use the network and provide the station with assurance that it is communicating with a legitimate network. IEEE 802.1x Access Control Approach. IEEE 802.11i makes use of another standard that was designed to provide access control functions for LANs. The standard is IEEE 802.1x, Port-Based Network Access Control. The authentication protocol that is used, the Extensible Authentication Protocol, EAP, or EAP, is defined in the IEEE 802.1x standard. 802.1x uses the terms supplicant, authenticator, and authentication server. In the context of an 802.11 WLAN, the first two terms correspond to the wireless station and the AP. The AS is typically a separate device on the wired side of the network, for example, accessible over the DS, but it could also reside directly on the authenticator. Before a supplicant is authenticated by the AS using an authentication protocol, the authenticator only passes control or authentication messages between the supplicant and the AS. The 802.1x control channel is unblocked, but the 802.11 data channel is blocked. Once a supplicant is authenticated and keys are provided, the authenticator can forward data from the supplicant subject to predefined access control limitations for the supplicant to the network. Under these circumstances, the data channel is unblocked. As indicated in the figure, 802.1x uses the concepts of controlled and uncontrolled ports. Ports are logical entities defined within the authenticator and refer to physical network connections. For a WLAN, the authenticator, the AP, may have only two physical ports, one connecting to the DS and one for wireless communication within its BSS. Each logical port is mapped to one of these two physical ports. An uncontrolled port allows the exchange of PDUs between the supplicant and the other AS, regardless of the authentication state of the supplicant. A controlled port allows the exchange of PDUs between a supplicant and another system on the LAN only if the current state of the supplicant authorizes such an exchange. IEEE 802.1x is covered in more detail in Chapter 5. The IEEE 802.1x framework with an upper layer authentication protocol fits nicely with a BSS architecture that includes a number of wireless stations and access points. However, for an IBSS, there is no AP. For an IBSS, 802.11i provides a more complex solution that, in essence, involves pairwise authentication between stations on the IBSS. The lower part of the figure shows the MPDU exchange dictated by IEEE 802.11 for the authentication phase. We can think of the authentication phase as consisting of the following three phases. 1. Connect to AS. The station sends a request to its AP, the one with which it has an association, for connection to the AS. The AP acknowledges this request and sends an access request to the AS. EAP exchange. This exchange authenticates the station and the AS to each other. A number of alternative exchanges are possible, as explained later. Secure key delivery. Once authentication is established, the AS generates a master session key, MSK, also known as the authentication, authorization, and accounting key, AAA, and sends it to the station. As explained subsequently, all of the cryptographic keys needed by the station for secure communication with its AP are generated from this MSK. IEEE 802.11i does not prescribe a method for secure delivery of the MSK, but relies on EAP for this. Whatever method is used involves the transmission of an MPDU containing an encrypted MSK from the AS via the AP to the AS. As mentioned, there are a number of possible EAP exchanges that can be used during the authentication phase. Typically, the message flow between the station and AP employs the EAP over LAN, EAP-OL protocol, and the message flow between the AP and AS uses the Remote Authentication Dial-In User Service, RADIUS protocol. Although other options are available for both station to access point and access point to authentication server exchanges. Here's a summary of the authentication exchange using EAP-OL and RADIUS. 1. The EAP exchange begins with the AP issuing an EAP request identity frame to the station. 2. The station replies with an EAP response identity frame, which the AP receives over the uncontrolled port. The packet is then encapsulated in RADIUS over EAP and passed on to the RADIUS server as a RADIUS access request packet. 3. The AAA server replies with a RADIUS access challenge packet, which is passed to the station as an EAP request. This request is of the appropriate authentication type and contains relevant challenge information. 4. The station formulates an EAP response message and sends it to the AS. The response is translated by the AP into a RADIUS access request with the response to the challenge as a data field. Steps 3 and 4 may be repeated multiple times depending on the EAP method in use. For TLS tunneling methods, it is common for authentication to require 10 to 20 round trips. The AAA server grants access with a RADIUS access accept packet. The AP issues an EAP success frame. Some protocols require confirmation of the EAP success inside the TLS tunnel for authenticity validation. The controlled port is authorized and the user may begin to access the network. Note from Figure 7.8 that the AP controlled port is still blocked to general user traffic. Although the authentication is successful, the port remains blocked until the temporal keys are installed in the station and access point, which occurs during the four-way handshake. Here we have another figure, IEEE 802.11i key hierarchies. During the key management phase, a variety of cryptographic keys are generated and distributed to stations. There are two types of keys: pairwise keys used for communication between a station and the AP, and group keys used for multicast communication. Based on the figure, we have shown two different key hierarchies. Okay, we have another table, IEEE 802.11i, keys for data confidentiality and integrity protocols. And this table defines the individual keys. So go ahead and pause and read through this. Pairwise keys are used for communication between a pair of devices, typically between a station and the AP. These keys form a hierarchy, beginning with a master key from which other keys are derived dynamically and used for a limited period of time. At the top level of the hierarchy are two possibilities. A pre-shared key, PSK, is a secret key shared by the access point and a station and installed in some fashion outside the scope of the IEEE 802.11i. The other alternative is the master session key, MSK, also known as the AAA key, which is generated using the IEEE 802.1x protocol during the authentication phase as described before. The actual method of key generation depends on the details of the authentication protocol used. In either case, PSK or MSK, there is a unique key shared by the AP with each station with which it wishes to communicate with. All the other keys derived from this master key are also unique between an AP and station. Thus, each station at any time has one set of keys as depicted in the hierarchy of figure 7.9a, while the AP has one set of such keys for each of its stations. The pairwise master key, PMK, is derived from the master key. If a PSK is used, then the PSK is used as the PMK. If an MSK is used, then the PMK is derived from the MSK by truncation if necessary. By the end of the authentication phase, marked by the 802.1x EAP success message, both the AP and the station have a copy of their shared PMK. The PMK is used to generate the pairwise transient key, PTK, which is in fact consisting of three keys to be used for communication between a station and access point after they have been mutually authenticated. To derive the PTK, the HMAC SHA-1 function is applied to the PMK, the MAC addresses of the station and access point and nonces, and those are generated as needed. Using the station and access point addresses in the generation of the PTK provides protection against session hijacking and impersonation. Using nonces provides additional random keying material. PTK parts. We can see there's three parts to the PTK, and they are as follows: EAP-overLAN, EAP-OL, key confirmation key, EAP-OL KCK. That supports integrity and data origin authenticity of station to AP control frames during optional setup of an RSN. It also performs an access control function. Proof of possession of the PMK key. An entity that possesses the PMK is authorized to use the link. EAP-OL key encryption key. That protects the confidentiality of keys and other data during some RSN association procedures. And there is the temporal key, TK. It provides the actual protection for user traffic. Group keys are used for multicast communication in which one station sends MPDUs to multiple stations. At the top level of the group key hierarchy is the group master key, the GMK. The GMK is a key generating key used with other inputs to derive the group temporal key, GTK. Unlike the PTK, which is generated using material from both AP and station, the GTK is generated by the access point and transmitted to its associated stations. Exactly how this GTK is generated is undefined. IEEE 802.11i, however, requires that its value is computationally indistinguishable from random. The GTK is distributed securely using the pairwise keys that are already established. The GTK is changed every time a device leaves the network. The upper part of this figure shows the MPDU exchange for distributing pairwise keys. This exchange is known as the four-way handshake. The station, an AP, uses handshake to confirm the existence of the PMK, verify the selection of the cipher suite, and derive a fresh PTK for the following data session. The IEEE 802.11i defines two schemes for protecting data transmitted in 802.11 MPDUs: the temporal key integrity protocol TKIP and the counter mode CBC MAC protocol CCMP. TKIP is designed to require only software changes to devices that are implemented with older wireless LAN security approaches, for example, the Wired Equivalency Privacy WEP. TKIP provides two services. One, message integrity. TKIP adds a message integrity code, MIC, to the 802.11 MAC frame after the data field. The MIC is generated by an algorithm called Michael that computes a 64-bit value using as input the source and destination MAC address values and the data field, plus key material. Data confidentiality. Data confidentiality is provided by encrypting the MPDU plus MIC value using RC4. The 256-bit TK is employed as follows. Two 64-bit keys are used with the Michael Message Digest algorithm to produce a message integrity code. One key is used to protect station to access point messages, and the other key is used to protect traffic in the other direction. The remaining 128 bits are truncated to generate the RC4 key used to encrypt the message transmitted. For additional protection, we can increase the TKIP sequence counter, TSC, and assign that to each frame. And the TSC serves two purposes. First, the TSC is included with each MPDU and is protected by the MIC to protect against replay attacks. Second, the TSC is combined with the session TK to produce a dynamic encryption key that changes with each transmitted MPDU, thus making cryptanalysis more difficult. CCMP is intended for newer 802.11 devices that are equipped with the hardware to support the scheme. As with TKIP, CCMP provides two services. Message integrity. CCMP uses the cipher blockchaining message authentication code CBC-MAC described in Chapter 3. Data confidentiality. CCMP uses the CTR block cipher mode of operation with AES for encryption, and CTR is described in Chapter 2. The same 128-bit AES key is used for both integrity and confidentiality. The scheme uses a 48-bit packet number to construct a nonce to prevent replay attacks. IEEE 802.11i pseudo-random function, PRF. At a number of places in the IEEE 802.11i scheme, a pseudo-random function is used. For example, it is used to generate nonces, to expand pairwise keys, and to generate the GTK. Best security practice dictates that different pseudo-random number streams be used for these different purposes. However, for implementation efficiency, we would like to rely on a single pseudo-random number generator function. The PRF is built on the use of HMAC SHA-1 to generate a pseudo-random bit stream. Recall that an HMAC SHA-1 takes a message, a block of data, and a key with length at least 160 bits and produces a 160-bit hash function. SHA-1 has the property that the change of a single bit in the input produces a new hash value with no apparent connection to the preceding hash value. This property is the basis for pseudo-random number generation. In this figure, we illustrate the functions of the PRF. And we're now on to our summary. We've talked about wireless network security, mobile device security, the 802.11 wireless LAN overview, and then we got into the 802.11i, and the I represents the security. And we talked about the different services of that security, the different phases, authentication, the protected traffic. And I think we've really covered a lot of wireless security. So hope you enjoyed. Bye for now.